Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of our dialogue. My name is Mohammed Ali Harisi, and I am the foreign editor at the Abu Dhabi-based The National newspaper. It's 7:30 a.m., 7:45 a.m., sorry, but I guess you all agree with me that it's never too early for a discussion about the Middle East, especially when it's coupled with a nice breakfast, food, and news, two of our favorites in the region, I guess. Our session title is The Iran Factor, Crisis, Convergence, Competition. After the October 7 attacks in 2023, the region has been rapidly changing and has been witnessing some of the most fierce shifting of alliances, wars, conflict, extensive diplomacy, and the main factor or the main link between all of these, one of the main links, is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Today, we are going to explore this role. We are going to try to speak about the shifting alliances in the region, about the US, China, Europe, competition for a bigger diplomatic role in the region. We're going to try to divide this session into 3 sections and give a round of questions for each of our distinguished panelists today, and then leave the last 15 minutes for a Q&A with the audience. And today we have a distinguished 5 panelists. Sorry, one second. Mr. Muhammad, Mr. Sayyid Muhammad Qazim Sajjadpour, Distinguished Senior Fellow at Institute for Political and International Studies and Advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Iran, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in Armenia, Vahan Kostanyan, Member of Indian Parliament, His Excellency Manish Tiwari, Director of US-based Interfaith Peace Building, Ms. Hind Kabawat, Director of Malcolm H. Carnegie Middle East Center, Ms. Maha Yahya. Mr. Sajjadpour, let me start with you by asking you about how you see the current status of Iran's role in the region, and how do you compare it to how it was before October 7, 2023?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here. I do thank ORF for inviting me, and since you introduced me as advisor to the foreign minister, and I want to have my own personal view, if I'm allowed, I start by a joke, early morning joke. And I'm very surprised to see so many people showing up. There is a joke that what's the difference between a general, an ambassador, and a scholar or think tanker? And the answer is all over the world, military people don't do anything real. But they start very early in the morning. Today we are military people. And diplomats or ambassadors, they don't do anything real, but they start very late in the evening. They have 2 receptions. And the scholars, they are confused. Sometimes very late, like last night. Sometimes very early, like today. But in any case, they cannot live without conceptual frameworks. So I answer your question with conceptual framework of my own. I think the conceptual framework, which includes your question and broader questions, is how Iran's interaction with the region can be understood. And the answer is ABC. A, analytical frames on Iran needs to be revisited. What do I mean? There is an analysis that Iran is weak. Your question had a latent, component compared with, October 7th. Iran is there, and I think the concept of Iran is becoming weak is really a concept which is not useful. Why? Because the concept was used by Saddam Hussein for starting a war against Iran, and he miscalculated the Iranian strength, Iranian sense of nationalism and defense of land, defense of its own, let's say, territory, and so on and so forth. I think the analytical frame on Iran is first on alarmistic Iran. You have to be fearful of Iran. It is a reductionist frame. they reduce everything of Iran to proxies, and by the word proxy by itself has analytical deficiency. So how we can understand, I think these analytical frames should be revisited. Instant analysis is not the way that yields to a real picture of reality. Today, this happens, oh, Iran is weak or Iran is this. I think you have to understand Iran is a genuine regional power. Of course, we have ups and downs, no doubt. It's like a game. In the first round, you may lose. In the second round, you may win. But you are there, and I think a genuine regional power which is defending itself, and for its security, it's not dependent on any external source of security. It's not borrowing security, and it has a very complex system. It's based on a revolution and so on and so forth. So I don't want to really go to the details of analysis, but what I advise is analytical frames should be revisited. B, building region on hegemonic desires is an impossibility. There is a hegemonic desire by the United States to reshape the region. And it's not just today. It has been for several decades. Before, it has also been imperial designs that we see. Today, there was in your set of questions in the booklet about Gaza, moving people, 2 million people. I think these are the desires and hegemonic desires to reshape. The region is not an object to just move this object from this place to that place. And I think any global hegemony which neglects the realities of the region, including Iran, is doomed to failure. Any regional hegemony which also ignores Iran is doomed to failure. And I think the region is a very complex place composed of actors which cannot be ignored. Be there big actors, regional actors, global actors, China and Russia cannot be ignored. So you have to have a, let's say, distance from this hegemonic sense that you can shape the region. And finally, my C is context of the region is a dynamic one. And in this context, we have two sets of issues. First, very deep, old, chronic issues and crises, like Palestinian issue. Palestinian plight is a real one. It is not an artificial one. It's not an Iranian-made issue. Israelis try to say, oh, it is Iran that makes all this. I think the reality is that the occupation, aggression for 70 years, of course, Iran resists occupation, resists hegemony, and so on and so forth. You have to understand the context, and it is not artificial. And furthermore, the second issue on the context is that you have emerging issues. These emerging issues, some of them are so connecting region together, either economically, socially, psychologically, and I think this is a reality, and you cannot just have a picture of region by one single concept or reducing the totality. So let's have a better understanding of Iran, that Iran is a part of the region, and it cannot be ignored in the region, it cannot be marginalized, and a region that, if we really desire a region to be peaceful, you have to understand that a part of it is Iran, and Iran is ready for what? Bilateral relations, for cooperation, for connectivity, and we are proud of this, especially the issue of connectivity between Iran and India, and I think it's a good point. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I totally agree that Iran cannot be ignored in the region. But speaking about its role and its influence, Ms. Kabawat, I wanted to ask you, recently we have seen the former Syrian regime falling in a matter of a few days. And the Syrian regime was one of the main allies of Iran in the region. Experts have been suggesting that this has significantly weakened Iran's influence over the Middle East. Do you agree with this assessment? And how do you see Syria's evolving position shaping the Middle East broader geopolitics?
Yeah. So good morning, everybody. It's very tough. I just came back from Damascus. And I just want to start that when you say that Iran is not a object in the region, I can start that Syrian people are not an object. Since the revolution in 2011 and the interfere of Hezbollah in backing the regime who killed 1 million Syrian people and destroyed 70% of the homes in the countries. And we have starvation, we have a chemical attacks, we got barrel. I don't need to repeat everything. But reality is because of Hezbollah backing by the Iranian, the Syrian people paid a very expensive price. So if they're not an object, they're the main who were very involved in killing the Syrian people for the last 14 years. But saying this, the fall of the Assad regime weakened Iran big time. And today, yes, there's still some, the Iranian, they're not going to give up this easy, for sure. And this is what we see in many things happening now on the ground. I was on Thursday in Banyas, and you can see that there is many spoilers, and there is many people, they don't want this revolution, and they don't want Syria to be okay. But saying this, yes, the proxy war, Hezbollah was, the Iranians are using proxy, the Hezbollah as a proxy war, number one. And number two, Iran has always this big dream to have this crescent, Shiite crescent, and ambition to have their influence in the region. It's not going to be anymore the cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kabawat. I know Mr. Sajadpour, maybe you want to comment on this, but I'll go to Ms. Yahya before. Ms. Kabawat, you mentioned Hezbollah, and Ms. Yahya, I wanted to ask you specifically about that. After the Syrian regime, or even before the Syrian regime fell, Hezbollah has went to a devastating war with Israel that killed almost its entire leadership. And it has been dramatically weakened in a matter of a few weeks. Are we witnessing the irreversible decline of Iran's most powerful ally? And how does this affect Tehran's regional status again?
Thank you for the question. Let me begin by thanking ORF, Samir Sadran, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in India for this event and for inviting me. I concur with the idea that Iran is not an object in the region. It's very much a part and an active actor in the region. However, Iran has played a role over the past 4 decades that got to a point where a few years ago, an Iranian MP was boasting that Iran had control over 4 Arab capitals. So it's created a lot of negative backlash, let's put it this way, in terms of the role that it has played, not just in Syria in terms of backing the former Assad regime, but also across the region. What we're witnessing today is I would say, a reconfiguration. This is just a moment in history, one particular moment. When it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon, the military hits, the attacks by Israel, the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, and much of the military leadership, not the political, much of the military leadership of Hezbollah has obviously been a tremendous blow on the organization. But I think it's too soon to tell or to kind of pass a judgment in terms of where things might go. We're in a period of transition and of transformation, both in Lebanon, but also across the region. And I think for Lebanon itself, it is a moment where Hezbollah is trying to figure out its next steps. It can go the way of reconfiguring itself as a political it already is a political party. It has two wings, obviously, the political and the military, but reconfiguring itself as a primarily political party, like other political parties in Lebanon, where it vies through elections, etc. Or we might see other developments happening, including the emergence of perhaps smaller groups, not burdened by the legacy of what we have seen over the past 4 decades. So there is a question mark in terms of that. In terms of Iranian strategic influence, yes, that has been weakened as well. Its ability to shape regional developments in the way it did prior to prior to 2023, I would say, has been weakened. However, it still is a very important actor that one cannot ignore. I would like to comment later, though, if you like, on something Dr. Sajapur said, but we'll leave it for later.
We'll finish this round and then we'll circle back for sure. Thank you, Ms. Yahya. Minister Kostanyan, you've heard us speaking about Iran, about conflict, about Gaza, about Syria, about Israel. I wanted to ask you, how have these developments impacted Armenia's foreign policy and its relations with regional players?
Thank you very much. Before going to answer to a question, let me thank the Indian Ministry of External Affairs for the great hospitality, but also to congratulate the ORF for the 10th anniversary of Raisina dialogue. Coming to your question, I'd like to draw two dimensions of the issue. First is geographical, because when we are speaking about the Middle East, we need to take account that the South Caucasus itself is a part of a broader Middle East, and everything which is happening in the Middle East, it directly affects the dynamics in our region, which is not calm as well. But also there is also an historical aspect to the issue, as in Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Palestine, Armenia has a huge historical community, and the state, the Republic of Armenia, has some duties related to our communities in these regions as well. And for us, it remains one of the priorities to engage with the governments of these countries in order to secure the life and the livelihoods of our compatriots, but also many of them are dual citizens of Armenia. And starting from the crisis in Syria back in 2010s, for example, we had dozens of thousands of Armenians who repatriated to Armenia. We had the issues when it's not stable in Lebanon. And the same with Israel and Palestine. But in general, when the situation in the region started to escalate, we feel that the earthquake, let me put it in this way, reached the South Caucasus as well, because we are getting trapped into the geopolitical games, and some of the Middle Eastern countries start to back some of our neighbors. The others start to support Armenia, but sometimes some of the countries from the Middle East lose the sense that their bilateral relations and the development of their bilateral relations should not harm the other countries, and in this particular case, Armenia, who doesn't want to take a side in the Middle Eastern conflict, but also calls for a peace and reconciliation, which we are politically interested in, one. But second, this is also our political belief that the dialogue is the only way to turn the page of violence and conflicts, not only in the Middle East, but also in South Caucasus and anywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Kostanyan. You've made an excellent point about how the conflicts are connected. If something happens in the Middle East, you can feel it elsewhere, especially in Europe and across all the regions. And one of these places where you can feel the impact of conflicts elsewhere is India, of course. And I wanted to ask you, Your Excellency, Mr. Member of Parliament Tawari, India has historically maintained strong relations with Iran, Arab state, and Israel, while also deepening ties with the US, all at the same time. But given the recent conflicts in the region, especially the unprecedented direct confrontation between Iran and Israel, are you concerned that India may have to compromise on some of these relationships?
Good morning and welcome to India. That's indeed a very profound question, if I may say. I think from an Indian perspective, what needs to be understood is that we do believe and we do regard that the Persian/Iranian civilization, and I use the words alternately, is a very old and an ancient civilization. You know, going back to the times of Cyrus and Darius, and a part of India at one point in time was in fact under the Persian Empire. So between the Hindu faith and Zoroastrianism, you know, there is a syncretic convergence. There is also a convergence between Persian as a language and Sanskrit. So therefore, we've had this very historical civilizational connection with Persia, now going back into millennia. Having said that, I think there is a need to normalize things and try and bring Iran into the larger mainstream of the global ethos. Fortunately or unfortunately more, since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, now going back 46 years, there has been a certain concerted attempt to try and vilify Iran. And obviously, it has had its consequences and implications in Iran trying to build a sort of fortress in order to defend itself. And essentially, what is really happening, and I do not speak either for the government of India or the political party I belong to, I speak for myself, that the greater Middle East is still dealing with the implications of certain Western powers trying to reorganize or continue to reorganize the world post the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire. And that's a project in continuum which unfortunately has not stopped. And so therefore, from India's point of view, we are not picking sides. Right? For us, it is not a question of Iran prioritized over Israel or X prioritized over Y. Insofar as we are concerned, and we have a large diaspora in the region, we would really want a peaceful, progressive, stable Middle East. And I think it is for the regional players in order to work out their dynamics. Because unfortunately, what has been going on, and which got exacerbated after the 7th of October 2023, but even before that, with Syria or with Libya or with Lebanon or in other parts of the greater Middle East, is not something which really augurs well for the people who live there. So ultimately, it is for the Middle Eastern nations to really sort out and resolve their contradictions, to start talking to each other, to try and find a modus vivendi where they can make their own region stable. And if India can play any role in bringing that about as a catalyst more than a facilitator, we would be more than happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Tawari. You've made a really important point about Western and foreign powers' role in the Middle East and the competition. But and this takes us to the second part of our conversation. But before we go there, I wanted to ask Mr. Sajjadpour if you have any comment or if you want to comment on what our esteemed colleagues mentioned before about the Iran's role in the region and the weakening and Hezbollah and Syria.
No comment.
Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Yahya, you wanted to comment on something that Mr. Sajjadpour said.
Very quickly, on the framework of the US trying to reshape the region, and I concur, it's been a continuous attempt. I would say today it's not just the US, it's actually Israel that's trying to reshape the region in a very profound manner, in a way that is more in keeping with its own strategic vision of what the region should look like. And that also sets a very dangerous precedent, as we're seeing the conflicts intensify across the region. I mean, as we've seen over the past year and a half, 60,000 people dead in Gaza is no small number. And today, as we were speaking earlier, there is bombings in Gaza. 30 airstrikes have been conducted this morning in Gaza, but also in Yemen a few days ago. So I think we need to kind of look at the things of what is happening on the ground also today, and the price that the region is paying effectively for this project of reshaping the regional security order, if you like.
Thank you, Mr.
No, I have a comment.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
No, actually, I 100% subscribe to what Dr. Mahia said, but I want to introduce a concept which may be useful. I think all social engineering projects have failed, including regional social engineering. I think Israelis and Americans' attempts is based on a type of regional social engineering that the region can be reshaped. And I think this is doomed to failure from the beginning, with high costs for everybody, for the region, and for those who try to reshape. Let's take the dynamism of human societies and the real issues seriously. Palestinian issue is a real issue. And I think till the time that it's not solved, you can, of course, use blame game. Blame this group, that personality, that actor. But the reality is that you have a people deprived of their own homeland and determining their own destiny. And you want to reshape the region in a way that shelf this, let's say, issue. I think this is doomed to failure. Thank you.
Thank you. The rules of engagement have been certainly being changed in the region, especially by Israel and other players in the Middle East, maybe backed more than before by Washington and by the administration of President Trump. But speaking of homeland, Mr. Sajjadpour, you mentioned homeland and you mentioned Gaza, and I wanted to ask you, President Trump came to his administration with these ideas about resolving the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, albeit with really eye-popping ideas like displacing, for example, the people in Gaza for some time until the rebuilding happens. Do you see these US efforts as a challenge to the region, or could they serve as an opportunity for a regional counter-response?
I think you have to take a bigger picture of Trump and what he's doing and his team are doing, not just in our region, globally, what they are doing. More importantly, because I follow every day, what they are doing domestically in the United States. They think they can reshape the United States. I think even maybe there are some elements in his administration which may think of even changing the constitutional frame of the United States in a way or the other. I think they are connected. What they see domestically, what they see regionally, and what they see globally. And there is a high degree of radicalism in what they pursue. And wherever there is radicalism, there would be resistance. And I think it's a universal law. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kabawat, follow-up question on this one. Given the current level of US and European engagement in the region, intensifying day after day, do you believe that Western powers can support conflict resolution in our region, or will the involvement have the opposite effect?
Just want to comment in one thing before we start. And when you see this geopolitics change and the interference of powers and what's happening in Middle East, you always see that the people in Middle East who are paying the price, and they're paying a very high price because of this interference, number one. And when we talked about reshape Middle East, and I just remember always the forced displacement in Syria and how especially the Iranian Hezbollah try to change the geographic and the forced displacement in our region. As now Iran is not in the picture anymore in Syria, I'm going to talk about especially in Syria and others. I can see the role of the EU more and more. Yesterday, there is a big meeting in Brussels, and this is for the donors and to help the Syrian. And you can see the EU is playing now a very effective role, and they're planning and to support the Syrian civil society. And you can see that they can play now a very important role in conflict resolution, because for the last 14 years, they've been really supporting the Syrian people in all the way from civil society to the accountability to the transitional justice file. So yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you, Ms. Kabawat. From Europe to China, I wanted to ask Mrs. Yahya about China's role in the region. We have seen significant agreement brokered by China in the last, I think 2 years ago between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which an agreement that would have long-term impact on the region, of course. How do you see the future of China-led mediation in the region? And can China at some point maneuver Washington in Middle Eastern diplomacy?
Just very briefly, I mean, China's mediation of the deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran was actually the culmination of dialogues that began in the region that were initially mediated by Oman and by Iraq. So this was a kind of a build-up, a process of build-up that began in the region. I say this because I want to emphasize that what we're seeing in the region today is not just the result of the war of others on our land. The region has internal structural problems, competition between countries, but also problems within countries. Syria's issues, 54 years of dictatorship under Assad, a civil war where there was an inability to put together an opposition that was able to represent an alternative. So there are profound structural issues. I did a rough calculation recently of just the cost of wars in the region. The cost is about $350 to $650 billion for reconstruction in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Libya, and Sudan. And Gaza. So just to give a sense of the scale of devastation that we're witnessing. And these are not all just external. The external parts, they've played a big role. When it comes to China and the need for mediation, I think it's incredibly important. What we're seeing today is a predominance of a security-based approach to the region. The Israeli actions, the US-backed, it's really a security-led perspective that only sees the region in terms of power structures and not in terms of the costs of citizenship or even on citizens, but even beyond that in terms of what the future could look like beyond the wars. It's not a peaceful an integrated region in that sense. You can't integrate by force. China can play an important role, as can other actors, as can India play an important role. What we've seen of Chinese efforts so far is that on the economic front, there are growing and increasing ties with various countries in the region. But we have not seen China put its money where its mouth is on the political front. It has not been willing to use its economic leverage its political capital so far to try and push for a solution, because that requires a lot more, not just diplomatic effort, but actual real engagement in the region in ways that until now have not been seen, and I would not wait for it at this point. I still think there's a huge role to be played in terms of diplomacy. Frankly, anything that can help is welcome today.
Thank you, Ms. Yahya. You mentioned India, and I wanted to ask Mr. Tawari, does India see itself taking a more active diplomatic role, or will it continue its pragmatic engagement with all sides?
India has not been and continues to be a non-interventionist power. And before I come to India's role, since China was brought up, may I very respectfully point out that if you look at the Chinese role, especially through the Belt and Road Initiative, especially in Africa and other parts of Asia, it's actually been a very malefic influence. The entire extractive model of debt diplomacy is not something which really helps build countries. It may help build your influence, but it builds an influence by alienating people. And that's been the experience of the African continent, who have taken huge loans or grants from China. So therefore, I would be very careful about Chinese mediation and Chinese efforts, because they come at a cost. Insofar as India is concerned, as I earlier pointed out, that it's really for the region to come together to try and find a modus vivendi with regard to their own structural problems or their contradictions. You see, there is nothing which can in any manner validate what happened on the 7th of October 2023. The unprovoked assault on Israeli citizens, men, women, and children, cannot be condoned by any right-thinking person, going back to any root causes argument that you may use. Similarly, Israel's disproportionate response, which has wiped out men, women, children, infrastructure in Gaza, is also something which cannot be condoned. The fact is that a method has to be found out of this horrific violence. And the method is not President Trump actually building a Rivera in Gaza. I think a political solution needs to be found. Israel's right to exist also has to be recognized, as is the right of the Palestinian state or the Palestinian people to their own homeland. So therefore, the two-nation formula, or going back to the UN mandate or the UN resolutions of 1948 and trying to rebuild upon them, is really the only way forward. And so therefore, the other thing which is equally important is that actors in the region have to realize that violence is a zero-sum game. If, going by whatever accounts are there in the public space, that the trigger for the attack by Hamas was an alleged normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, then that is the most negative manifestation of how you should be really looking at your own problems. And since there's a paucity of time, I'll stop here. But suffice to say that if there is a way forward, as I earlier pointed out, we would be more than happy to be catalysts. But we have historically not been mediators or facilitators.
Thank you so much. Excellent points, Mr. Tawari. Speaking of mediation, I wanted to ask Minister Kostanyan. Armenia has faced its own conflicts in the past, of course, and still, and engaged in complex diplomatic negotiations to achieve stability. Based on its experiences, what lessons or advice can you offer to Iran and other Middle Eastern countries for conflict resolution?
If I may touch upon some of the points which were brought during the discussion, I do believe that in every time, even in this turbulence that we are living in, the world and the regional powers, the great powers, everybody needs some common denominators, because everybody, regardless of the fact that conflicts continue, everybody wants to continue to speak to each other. And here, probably South Caucasus can be one of the common denominators, and the stability in the South Caucasus can be one of the points where the positions of states and different countries are not different from each other. Let me bring an example. Just a couple of days ago, Armenia and Azerbaijan announced that we finalized the work on the text of a peace treaty, which Armenia hopes that will be signed very soon. All the P5 states from the Security Council, the Middle Eastern countries, GCC countries, Iran, Russia, Western countries, including many of the EU member states, United States, everybody welcomed this development in our region. And I do believe that we need to find some success stories which can rebuild the trust. Two of the words which I'm listening very frequently starting yesterday, it's trust and crossroads. So the region that I'm representing can become a crossroads. And speaking about the crossroads, we're speaking about conflicts and not diving into another layer of the situation, the whole geopolitics and the geoeconomy. This is a competition of new transport routes. And we can speak about different transport routes. It can be IMAC, it can be north-south, it can be middle corridor. But in for each of these transport connectivity huge projects, South Caucasus plays a vital role for all of them. And we in Armenia do believe that connectivity and interconnectivity can become one of the pillars of peace and stability in the world, and Armenian government's initiative Crossroads of Peace, which is basically about the opening of the communications in our region and providing transit for all countries, starting from India, China to West. This can be a game changer in a broader picture. Sometimes little changes in the regions which doesn't seem to be very important in the broader context, they can become a common denominator.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stay with you, and I'm going to ask, we're running out of time, but I'm going to ask one question, the same question for our panelists, and I would like you please to comment on a few words. Do you see the Middle East heading, it's a very complicated question, do you see the Middle East heading toward more wars, or are we heading towards a big comprehensive peace agreement?
Question to me?
Yes, please.
Okay. We talk too much about what do we see, rather than what do we want, or what do we have political courage to do. Yesterday, before sleeping, I was listening to one podcast about history repeat, etc., etc. It continued today morning with distinguished panelists before we were chatting before the panel started, and we again were thinking about and talking and elaborating on history. I was thinking, okay, are all the examples coming from the history and the conflicts repeat every time? The answer probably is a bit hopeful with yes. For example, Franco-German conflict, it lasted too long in Europe. But today we see that France and Germany are collaborating and bringing their power together in order to strengthen Europe. So here I do believe that this is a matter of political courage. And the history remembers the ones who show this political courage to win and to win peace for both sides of the conflict.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Ms. Yahya.
I'm reminded of Gramsci's famous saying, where the old order is dying, the new one is emerging. And then in this interregnum, we have all the kinds of monsters are emerging. We are in that period, and unfortunately, not to be so pessimistic this early in the morning, but in the short term, I'm not seeing any kind of prospects for a more peaceful resolution. Actually, I'm seeing an intensification of conflicts over the short term. What that will hold for the medium to long term, I think, is an open question. However, one can only be hopeful and say,
always,
let's hope for the best, and actually not hope, but work for the best.
Thank you, Ms. Kabawat.
Yeah. I do see that people in Middle East are fatigued and tired of war. And every time we have discussions, and they don't want to be compared to what's happened in Iraq and what happened in Yemen, they want to have peace. And this is the conversation now, that enough of war. We've been paying big price. We did see that open door diplomacy is very useful. Lately, the new Syrian interim government open to Saudi Arabia, to Turkey, and to the Gulf countries. And yes, I think there is a big hope. They don't want to go back to war. It's been enough is enough.
Thank you, Mr. Tawari.
Well, the world survives in hope. And we do hope that there is peace and stability in the Middle East. I think the important thing to remember is that except for the military-industrial complexes, there's nobody else who benefits out of war. They are the ones who make the money out of the killing machines, and you become the fodder for those killing machines. And so therefore, if you do not want to continue becoming that fodder, you need to find a way to resolve things. And finally, I would say, see, the future of humankind lies on the intersection of two civilizations. A brick and mortar civilization which has emerged over the millennia, and a virtual civilization which is evolving. So therefore, for the sake of the coming generations, let's put the conflicts and the contradictions of the physical civilization behind us, and these hegemonistic frameworks which have really impelled these impulses. I think the time has come to rein them in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sajadpur.
I think it's a very good question, but maybe with less time. But I have 3 quick points. First, I think nothing is wrong with the people in the region. There is nothing essentialist about the Middle East. We are not born to have wars, so wars and conflicts are imposed on us. So I think the Middle Eastern people, from Arab countries to Turkic people to Persians and to the others, very good people, normal people, peace-loving people. So this is very important because some of the analytical framework that we see have a type of deterministic, essentialist reading of the people of the region. We should correct them. We should we engineer them. I think this is wrong. The second point is not everything in the region is about conflict. And we have a lot of cooperation in the region. How? Look at our bilaterals with India, with UAE, with Saudi Arabia. I think, yes, we have, as a daily life is, it's about up and down, but you have an incremental, progressive process in diplomatic interactions, which really solves essential issues by patience and so on. And the third, of course, is hope. I think, yes, action needs to be, but never we have to lose hope as human beings. I, as a Muslim and a believer and a Shia, I think the end of the world is really light. It's not dark, but to reach to that light, you have to work, as Dr. Yahya said, work, and I think it's possible. I think the gathering of today, thanks to Samir and the Indian Foreign Ministry, is a reflection of that. There is a place for action, intellectual, political, and so on and so on. So I end by a diplomatic saying that I learned, and I think the essence of diplomacy is about activism and action. And the saying says, hope for a diplomat is like courage for a soldier and water for a fish. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you ended with hope and action. This is maybe the main takes from our session today. We're running out of time, but maybe we can take one or two questions from the audience if someone wants to ask. So go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is directed.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. My question is directed to you. Yes. So I have two quick questions to you, sir, as well as I'd love to get Miss Maha's comments if possible. I'm Ananya Singh, a student of Sionspo and a student-nominated delegate here. My first question was, you spoke about US hegemonic ties as well as India-Iran relations. And with US recently having revoked its sanctions on the Chabhar strategic port project, do you see any progression that India and Iran might pursue that further now, or are there still any concerns that Iran has on its side regarding the same? My second quick question was, given the return of the Trump presidency, any hopes for a JCPOA with USA is now gone. So would Iran still be willing to have any renewed plans for the JCPOA with European, Indian, or any other powers at this moment?
Thank you.
I think on your first question about the title was Chabahar. Chabahar. I think very quick comment. First of all, Iranian-Indian relationship is independent of third factor in a way. That means, as His Excellency said, it's a civilizational relationship, and we are not just nation states, as some of the scholars say. We are civilizational states in a way. So we should not reduce the totality of Iranian-Indian relationship to this issue of Chabahar, and then reduce the Chabahar to the issue of U.S. sanction. I think both countries are working to the better situation. Not on the, and I think this independence of bilaterals is very key. I don't have time to explain. The second question, I think you know the American position, but Iran, as you see in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, we had negotiation with 3 Europeans. I mean, that means Germany, UK, and France, though we disapproved their positioning in the Security Council. And also, our Deputy Foreign Minister was in Beijing, having a very useful meeting with Chinese and Russian Deputy Foreign Ministers on the issue of JCPOA. So I think we are working on that.
Thank you so much. I wanted to leave more time for questions, but I think we're running out of time and we have to conclude. But please, I encourage you to interact with our panelists after the session and ask them all the questions you want. Thank you so much. Thank you.